Great. Welcome everyone to Senate Education. It's Tuesday afternoon. We do have a busy week ahead of us. We have 3 weeks until crossover, 3 weeks in which we'll meet, which really means only 12 days. And I think we'll be in good shape to move our biggest priorities and even some of our smaller priorities. Today we have agreed to dedicate an hour to hear some more testimony on S284. This is an act relating to the use of electronic devices and digital and online products in schools. We're then going to walk through the miscellaneous education bill, where we'll see that we've added a couple of things and consider other items to add in the coming days. S204, an act relating to reading assessment intervention. I believe we have a new version of that that we will look at. And then S303, we can talk about it when we get there, but a couple of things I really, for one, need to understand, and I've asked Beth to start to look into this. If we were to adopt the imaginary library, what does that really look like? How would the state do it? Can the state do it? Sort of the ins and outs. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about that. And then I have been getting emails, I think it's related to S204, on a certain kind of language that people might want us to put in that is not a good way to teach reading. But we can yeah. I think we're all getting a flurry of emails on literacy bills, which happened 2 years ago as well. And then we'll wrap up with an act relating to new American Advancement Grant applicants. We have a citizen that's been impacted not having this legislation.
Immigration attorney.
The immigration attorney. Thank you. Maybe we can put that on there. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's get started. And we've got we have a full hour. So I'd say think about 5-6 minutes for testimony for each person. Laura Marquez Garrett, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Okay. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much. So Chair Campion and members of the Senate Education Committee.
I just wanted to make sure everybody knows the blue folder on your desk. The navy blue folder is Laura Marquez Garrett's PowerPoint presentation that you can follow along as she talks. And then she can also share screen when she needs to.
Yeah, we'd like her to share screen so everybody can see it. Great, thank you.
Let me go ahead and share that screen to make sure I can pull that one off here. Let's see. All right, is that working on your end?
Yes, beautifully. And Laura, just so you know, so you don't get cut off. Everybody gets about 6 minutes or so.
Okay, and this is a short presentation.
Great,
so you all have the hard copy documents with you, and because of the time limitation, I'm going to skip a lot of those slides.
Great.
So just to start, I'm an attorney in Seattle, Washington. I work at a small startup firm known as the Social Media Victims Law Center. We were formed 2 years ago to represent families harmed by social media and to help create change in the industry. So again, I'm going to skip through a lot of these slides just in the interest of time. The only thing I want to say on the first few slides, you've also got it blown up behind you there. That is some data from Jean Twenge. It shows how the health harms among American youth have been rising steadily since 2012. And that chart, I believe, goes to 2018. There's a number of charts in there. I know there's, oh, yes.
I'm sorry, Laura, can you give us some direction?
The chart.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we just need the witness to talk. Sorry. Go ahead, Laura. Are you there? Did you mute yourself? Like she's talking and. Laura, can you hear us? Okay, we cannot hear you, just so you know. Okay.
Now.
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Let's try this again. I'm going to share this screen here. Thank you for letting me know that I was muted. So what I was saying is that there's some data right to your right there, and that comes from Jean Twenge. There's other data in the materials we've given you. It just shows how these harms have been steadily rising since the introduction of certain social media platforms and tech around 2012. In other words, while COVID did not help the mental health crisis our children are going through, it also did not cause it. So I speak on mental health harms and social media harms often. And a question I often get starts with, now we know there are benefits of social media, but. And so before I jump into this data, I just want to address that premise, but there are benefits. And the first point I would make is that social media is not the internet. A lot of these benefits that social media companies are taking credit for, things like resources and community, these are things we got from the internet more than a decade before. And as a member of the LGBTQ plus community and someone who was a teenager in 1995, I can attest to that firsthand. Resources, chat rooms, all of these things were very important to myself, to my friends, to our community. But we had access to them without addiction, without exploitation, without taking our personal data and selling it. So again, I would just point out that these are benefits that we had before social media. The second point I want to raise very quickly, in our society, we use risk utility tests all the time. Planes are a good example. Planes provide a lot of benefits, but if we were losing one commercial plane a day to design defects and other issues, many of us would never get on a plane, no matter how beneficial it might be. In these materials, I've provided and we're going to be looking through just some of the plane crashes that these companies are allowing to happen every day with our kids. And so when it comes to the benefits, again, when Meta is saying, hey, 20% of kids feel happier because of social media, that expects us to ignore the significant number of kids that are suffering incredible harms because of design decisions. In fact, there's a slide in your packet where Meta says PYMK, that's people you may know. It's a user recommendation algorithm. It says PYMK contributed historically up to 75% of adult minor grooming on the platform. Another Meta employee chimes in and says, this is really disturbing. Why haven't we just turned this off? So now I'm going to go through just some examples from the data here about how kids and adults experience social media differently. Some of this is graphic, but honestly, I've toned it down significantly. And I will try not to linger on the stuff that's more graphic. This is the Discover feature on Snapchat. This is what it looks like on an unused account, identifying as a 46-year-old female. We open an account and identify it as a 14-year-old male. And this is what we got, right? So you've got a comparable account. One is an adult female, one is a young child. These are the experiences these kids are having. I meet with families all the time and see kids who look at their parents' Instagram accounts and are like, is this real? This is like PG. Where I actually met with a mother and daughter just yesterday, and the daughter said, where are the sex ads? 16-year-old girl, where are the sex ads on your account? This isn't real. So that's the experience that our kids are having. Another example.
All right, to interrupt for a second. These are your kids? Okay, they're somebody's kids. All right, they're just not hanging out.
Yes, so this is, that's a great question. This is my account. This is my account. Yes, so this is my account, which I don't use, right? I've never run any searches. This is what Snap pushes through its Discover feature. That's the stuff Snap claims to curate. These are not your friends, your friends. This is the third-party content, if you will, that the platform pushes out and recommends. So this was my account that's unused, no searches. We then open an account and identify it as a 14-year-old boy. And this was the same feature. This is what the 14-year-old boy gets on Snapchat. And I see this every day in these kids' account data and talking with these kids. They say, look, this is what we see. This is not what our parents see. This is from the account of a 16-year-old boy who had just made the soccer prep team. He got thrown into what's called a rabbit hole by TikTok. Thousands, literally, we have the data, thousands of depressing suicide-themed videos. On a day in February, he searches for motivational speech. So he inputs that into TikTok. These are just some of the screenshots of the videos he gets from TikTok. On the same day, he searches for motivational speech. I don't know. I hope you all can see that on the screen. Things like sleeping is not enough. I need to die. A few days later, he goes to the gym, is headed home, and texts his friend and says, I'm tired. I can't do it anymore, and takes his own life. And this is one of several 16-year-olds where I've seen this same outcome, where you see massive amounts of suicide and depression when they are not searching for that ever. Drug menus.
Hey, Laura, can you go to full screen on that? We don't need slides on the side.
Yep. Let me see if I can figure that out. Let me try. Should I do slideshow?
Lower right corner. It's a little podium. Lower, like very bottom right corner. Other right. There we go. Left, right. There we go. Right there.
Hey, I learned something new. Can you guys see that? How do I get rid of this on the right here? Or can you see that?
We also have it in our blue folders.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah,
Are you able to see that full screen?
No, but
no, you're showing like a presentation.
Okay. Let me share, hang on, let's try this one more time. Let me try sharing. How about now? Wait, how about now?
There you go.
All right. So this is a 16-year-old on TikTok, searches for motivational speech, gets I need to die. These are just a few. There are thousands and thousands of these. We've seen the data. I will be very frank in this moment and say I actually see a counselor myself, which I started since this work. And these were some of the videos that drove me to decide that I needed to see a counselor, because it's very difficult when you're seeing these one after another after another. Drug menus. If you know teenagers, if you work in a school, please ask them if they've ever seen a drug menu. Ask them if Snapchat has ever recommended they add a plug. A plug refers to a drug dealer. This is incredibly common. I have met with children who say, I was 12 when I opened a Snapchat. I wanted the goofy filters. I'd never heard of marijuana. And then I was getting massive amounts of content glorifying drugs, telling me they were cool, adding, telling me to add dealers. This is a very common experience for many young children. Side note, I've spoken with dozens of adults who have Snapchat, none of whom have ever seen a drug menu. This is a recording that I took in September of 2023. I was at a senior care facility with my children. They were in a media room while we were celebrating my in-laws' 100th birthday. Excuse me, children aged 3 to 11. I had no idea that the media room could even get social media. They were watching a Disney film. I walked in to check in on the kids and I see YouTube. The 11-year-old has turned on YouTube and there are these weird Peppa the Pig short videos, which doesn't make sense to me. I record and you will see. Whoop. And of course it went back. Anyway, you will see there, you had this image dubbed over. I recognize this image because it is a very popular one in TikTok videos. This is an example from that young man's account I just showed you of a video he received with the same image. These are just some examples of how these products work very differently for children than adults. I have seen data from dozens, if not hundreds of accounts. Again, I've seen kids ask their parents, what is this? And I have also spoken to multiple children who've seen live murders and suicides on these apps. Again, I have yet to meet a single adult who had the same experience. The thing is, we can teach our children about technology without giving these companies access to their personal and private information, without forcing it into every aspect of their daily life. And it's not just about convenience or economics. It is easier to market on social media, but kids are being harmed and parents are being stripped of even the most basic ability to make decisions about their children's safety. Now, the last set of screenshots I'm going to show you come from a Discord account. These are actual conversations that took place in class because of Discord and ineffective blocking software. You will see here, my dad turns off my Wi-Fi at home. She had a Gab phone, right? So my phone doesn't have the App Store or a search engine. Why does he do that? I used to sell my nudes and I tried to kill myself. He blames it on social media. This stranger says, well, social media probably played a part, right? Not on Discord at home. In class, some guy asked me for feet pics. I'm not going to, let's see, sorry, here's another one. I'm not going to read this one out loud. This is sexual exploitation of a 14-year-old child. This happened while she was in class on a school-issued device. This happened after her parents begged the school not to give her a school-issued device because they knew that she had a problem. They knew she was being harmed. They were trying to get her help. And the school said, this is part of our curriculum. It's not a choice. This happens a lot more frequently than you would think. I heard a great quote recently that said, give your kids social media when you want their childhood to end. This is what our kids are going through. And folks, they're going through it in school. There are other examples in the PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through those in the interest of time, but you do have them in there. Michael Brewer, Emma Claire Gill, kids who started accessing because a coach showed them funny filters, because a class was using it for homework, a basketball team. My own child came home one day and said to me, if YouTube's dangerous, why is our teacher showing us a YouTube video in class? As you can imagine, my kids have the benefit of a lot more information than most. And the question was a fair one. School is supposed to be a place where our children are safe. And it's imperative that we not prioritize convenience over their safety, and that parents and students be given the choice when it comes to their most personal data. It's also imperative that everyone have access to education. That's what S284 is about, and that's what I'm here today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any questions or comments. You're welcome to stay on. We're going to shift to Matthew Bergman. Mr. Bergman.
Sorry, so Matthew is the founder of SMVLC. Both of our names are in there, but it's me today.
Great. Okay, we're going to shift into Pat Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln, please join us.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good start.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us
Yeah.
your thoughts on the bill and whatever you'd like to share.
All right, cool. Yeah, my name is Patrick Lincoln. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the state of Vermont. I've worked professionally as a mental health counselor for over a decade in Washington State, Idaho, Virginia, Ohio, now here in Vermont. My current position, however, is in the Hartford School District. I work as Dean of Students in the middle school in Hartford. So Hartford Memorial
5 through 8.
Middle School, 6 to 8.
6 to 8.
Yeah. You know, and I think there are a number of things I could say in the interest of time. I'll just start like generally. The culture we need to create in our schools is one where kids can come in and feel safe, right? Physically safe, emotionally safe, like safe in their bodies, which is co-regulating with other human bodies, feeling safe, like around other human beings. And the business model by which, you know, social media operates, all personal digital devices operate, really counteracts any sense of safety. In fact, it's motivated by instilling fear and anger, because that will increase the likelihood you'll switch to different tabs and navigate around the internet quickly, which exposes you to more advertisements to make more money, because it's really, really easy to make a human body scared or angry. That's how we've evolved. It's about our survival. It's important that we get really quickly scared and that we get really quickly angry. It takes a lot of time, investment, and actual physical human contact to feel safe. And so it's never going to be as profitable to help people feel safe or calm because it's too slow. It's about tone of voice. It's about eye contact. It's about a teacher building a relationship with kids. And that can only happen when we are physically present with one another. That's how our nervous system has evolved for 5,000 generations. And that's really, really important. And so allowing personal digital devices, which link up to all the social media, you know, into a classroom, into a school, is comparable to, you know, trying to teach a class with a few mountain lions in the classroom. You know, our bodies are going to be like freaked out and hyper aware. And we know that every time we get a notification on the phone, every time that thing goes off, we get a shot of cortisol, you know, the stress hormone, which is the same thing that would happen if we were walking outside and saw a mountain lion, which can happen in Washington State, where I moved from. And so like, that's one way to think about it. Like how successful would teaching go to a group of young people if there were a few apex predators hanging out in the room? It's not going to go very well. So at Hartford, I'm very glad to say that we do have a cell phone free policy at the school. We require that each child either lock their phone into a yonder pouch, which I think I could even show you, but these here, which make it inaccessible during the day, they lock, and then there's a magnet at the front office that they like open their phone. You have to kind of track it, and it opens up as they leave at the end of the school day.
So they're sort of hanging up somewhere.
There's a magnet on the wall. I guess
Okay.
we remove it during the school day so
Yeah.
that kids don't have access to it. And at the end of the day, we put the magnet out and they just kind of walk by and knock it, grab their phone. Or if this doesn't work for them, for whatever reason, they'll turn their phone into the office. And so we have like a rack of phones that we keep in the main office. So kids at the end of the day will come in and just kind of pick their phone up.
So just practically, how many phones are we talking about here?
Our school has like 313 kids, and I'd say 311 of them probably from phone. I mean, I don't know. There are
No, thank you.
kids that do not, but yeah, it's a lot. And you know, the policy's been in place for a couple of years before I came on, and I've just been chatting with different teachers, and across the board, ideologically, pedagogically, no one regrets having made the decision. Everyone just tells me over and over again, we have so many like fewer issues with phones now, so many fewer issues with phones. I can't imagine doing my job, and my focus is behavior, relationships. You know, I'm the behavior guy in the building. I cannot imagine having to navigate what I do every day if they had their phones. They're not designed to certainly at that age, but I think for any of us as adults, they're not designed to really work with our own kind of innate willpower, right? They're designed to be addictive. And young kids are much more vulnerable to that. So I'm very, very thankful for it. And it's really simple. It's really easy. Like we have a few kids that struggle with it, but it's not many. By far and away, the majority of kids follow through with it. It's just part of the school culture. They know it's there. We do random yonder house checks where we walk through and kind of make sure that they're in there. If it's an issue, we'll talk to parents. And I, as dean of students, I am frequently talking to parents. I have not spoken to a parent who has pushed back and said, like, why do you have this policy? It's all just sort of like a given, right? I went to my grandfather's high school in Virginia, and there was a student smokers lounge, you know, because that's what you did in the 50s and 40s in high school. And now we can all look at that and say, that's totally wrong-headed. Why would we ever allow kids to smoke in school? It's my hope.
Wait, it
that-
wasn't just the forties and fifties. I remember the seventies. Yeah, eighties,
By the
nineties.
time I was in high school in the 90s, it was long gone.
Yeah,
But I hope it doesn't take us that long to recognize the kind of poisonous digital haze that is like following our kids around in the hallways, in the classroom, because it's just as wrong-headed. We would never allow kids to bring cigarettes into a school. So why would we allow them to bring something that's equally harmful?
so,
Questions?
yeah, no, I appreciate this very much, and it's great to hear.
Yeah.
You know, from somebody who's on the ground. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate everything you're doing, and we know your job, it has to be challenging, is an understatement, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, we're
Well, what's the argument, would you say, for us to do this statewide rather than sort of district by district, school by school? Is there an argument, or should we just sort of, one of the options we have, for example, is we could, and we've done this in the past, we could ask the Agency of Education to come up with a model policy.
Mhm.
And we could say, we would, you know, not require it, but, you know, they might look at what you're doing, other schools are doing, saying, this is what works. If you're thinking about moving in this direction, this is one way to do it. And then see how it goes for, you know, a couple of years, something like that.
My response to that would be, we know this is the right thing to do from a public health perspective. Again, similar to would we allow cigarettes into the classroom?
Yeah.
We know it's the right thing. Schools have so much to contend with. I could work 80 hours a week and responding to hazing, harassment, and bullying. I can't tell you the number of kids I meet with every day, the number of parents I talk to every day. The more burden that can be removed from the backs of schools right now and school districts, the better. So for us to be able to say the state is requiring this, I cannot tell you how much of a relief that would be as a school district to say,
I understand.
take it up with your senator.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my response to it. It's just, it's the right thing to do. And so why not do the right thing? That's yeah. Other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your testimony, so compelling, and my kids sort of grew up in the late 90s, so they didn't get cell phones until they were seniors in high school, which was awesome, but I think it's probably harder now to do that than it was then. But I just wanted to ask two questions. One, has the removal of cell phones during the school day manifested at all in test scores, or do you guys have any data to sort of back up all of the great things that you've talked about today?
I don't have that data on hand to show you. It's my coworkers kind of wheelhouse, the academic side of things. I focus more on the mental health side of things. I will also say that the cell phone free policy was instituted around the time of COVID and all those restrictions. And so there's just a lot of stuff that's been like up in the air and flux. And so I think like any sort of measurable data would take some time to come by. I just have to kind of anecdotal like, experience.
How about
share.
the YRBS data? Is there anything out of the YRBS that would suggest that it's been positive? They do that in middle school, don't they? Or is that just high school?
I think it's not since I have been in this position has it happened. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's like the data side of things. But
YRBS.
Risk survey, behavior survey.
I believe it is done. It has not, and I am a relatively new dean of students. I've been in the school as a classroom clinician for previous to that, and worked in schools for a long time before this. But yeah, I don't have data from our district that shows that. I mean, I was at a school dance recently, just quite an experience, and asking students like I asked probably 10 students, and I asked students this all the time when I was a clinician as well. Like 12-year-old kids, like my son's age, like. Let's say you're a father, Jonah. What age would you give your kid a cell phone? Like when would you give a kid a smartphone? And I have yet to have a child respond to me that they would give their own child a smartphone at the age that they were given one. Like each child I speak to, they're like, probably 17, 18, 16, 15. Like they know it, and these are kids that are like, they answer the question, they go right back to their phones, but they get it.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, by the way,
Yeah.
but that is a good segue to my second
Yeah.
question. Which is I serve in the Senate with some folks who are very strong advocates for parental control.
Mhm.
Parental, control is the word I'll use. So this bill, in a sense, usurps parental control by saying you no longer have the decision-making over your kids' cell phone use during the day, and it puts it in the hands of another body, let's say, right? Well, in this case, the legislature.
Yeah.
And so how do you respond to those folks? What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, I think I would use a similar analogy as to like, a child who brings cigarettes to school or just like a giant bag of sugar. Like, as a school, we're gonna say, Johnny, that's probably not the best thing to have in class right now. Like, you can keep your bag of sugar in the office and take your bag of sugar home at the end of the day. But during the school day, we have to protect a safe, fun, vibrant learning community as best as we can. And we know that phones get in the way of that. And also, I think the question is premised on the idea that there's any parental control, within the phone itself, right? Like, I think that one of the things we're facing is courting kids back into relationship with adults. Because of the peer orientation that is fostered through social media, it's actually a loss of parental control to be engaged with these devices in the first place. And so I think if anything, we're actually aiding parental control by setting an example for like, hey, you can live and be in a relationship and engage with people without these devices. Like, look, we're modeling it for you. And I have parents a lot of times who love I talk to them about ways to set limits at home and ways that like what we do at the school could be carried over at home as well in terms of cell phone free dinners or cell phone free family activities. Like I have those kind of conversations with parents. I think I've only had parents like appreciative of what we're doing in that regard.
So can you tell me what was the genesis for this policy in your school? When you showed up?
When I showed up, it was already in place,
Okay.
so I was like, "That's awesome! I'm glad it's in place." I wish I could speak to the history of that.
Okay.
I can't, unfortunately, but I'm really glad that it's in place. I think that it happened. It's been like I think roughly 4 years. But yeah, it's not it's so simple. I mean, it's just the kids are issued one of these at the beginning of the year. They're expected to stick their phone in here. They open it up at the end of the day. If we find kids like finding ways to open them up, then they turn their phone into the office for a week and then they can try again after a week. If we have a continued issue, which is not common, it's just a phone call to a parent like, hey, Johnny's having an issue with the phone. He's not willing to put it in the other pouch. If we have kids that have a medical need, if they're monitoring insulin, for example, like of course they have their phones and access to their phones for medical reasons, and our reasons, and our nurse is involved in that aspect of things, making sure that kids who need it can, have it. But
Yeah, weeks, did you pass it? No, Senator.
Senator Rashid,
Yeah, actually, this might end up being more of a question for a teacher, who's, in. Yeah, but I'm looking at the opt-out part of this, and I was thinking about something you had mentioned earlier about, the state mandating something that's actually a bit of a relief for teachers. And also just to preface, I am strongly opposed to social media. In general, there's a reason my daughter has no social media, so I appreciate the work you do and what you're saying here, but part of this bill allows a student to opt out of, as I understand it, exposure to any technology. And if I'm misunderstanding, please correct me, but and the teacher has to then create an equivalent lesson plan for that same student. If the student is opting out of any exposure to, let's say a video that the teacher is showing. And if the teacher doesn't do that, then there's a private right of action to sue, I believe, the school district. And I was wondering if you have thoughts on that, or because I feel, because I'm looking at this from the perspective of, what are we putting on teachers that may create more work? And so do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. To be completely honest, like that's not my kind of in the trenches lived experience. I'm not a classroom teacher, like thinking through all of those pieces. It's not something I have as much experience with. I will say that we adopt like individualized plans, for all kinds of kids, right, through special education, and I think we would need robust like scaffolding for classroom teachers to craft that kind of learning. But even at my school, like there are kids that have a lot of problematic behavior on their Chromebooks, and so frequently like they won't be instructed through Chromebooks, and so they're having to craft plans for that. But I think there's some benefit to it. It's kind of like the whole there's a fancy term for this, but like when you install ramps for wheelchairs, in downtown Montpelier, like parents with baby carriages benefit too, right? Like you have to go and put in this ramp because like folks, whatever, for Americans with Disabilities Act require that, and then everyone gets the benefit. I think it'd be similar that if classroom teachers were having to think like we're thinking creatively about curriculum and instruction and not just using the Google suite of options or going the kind of like the easy internet route. I think the benefits would be experienced by everybody. Like it would be maybe another menu item that kids could choose from, and maybe even choose it themselves, not just parents pushing for it. Like I've worked in alternative classrooms where a lot of the instruction doesn't happen on a screen for a host of reasons, and maybe just because of like the different learning needs of kids. And they're pretty open to it and responsive to it. But I don't deny the fact that there would need to be, I think, strong institutional support at the district level, the state level, to kind of to like craft the kind of pedagogy that we would want to see, and that would allow kids to not use screens to learn. But that's another topic. I think it'd take more time to talk about, but I think that that's also important, and that we create schools are kind of islands of refuge for just human to human contact and learning.
Thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Lincoln?
I'm good.
No, any other questions?
Oh, sorry, for me.
Yeah. Well, you're
I'm
welcome.
happy, yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to stick around. Of course,
Yeah.
We're gonna move on now to
Cool.
Dr. Yukika.
Yukika.
Welcome, doctor. Thanks
Hi,
for
thank you. I'm gonna dive right in because I thought I had 15 minutes. I was gonna talk for 10, so I'm just gonna get going. So my
Right.
name is Dr. Rebecca Yukika. I'm a community pediatrician here in Bradford and East Thetford, Vermont. I came to New England to study at Smith College, and then I moved back to DC where I taught high school chemistry for 2 years. So I have an experience of being a high school teacher. I then went on to become a physician, did my residency. I now run this community pediatric practice. And on my Wednesday mornings off, I work in an MAT program where I treat patients in opiate addiction. So I also am a parent as well. When I was first asked to present this testimony, my initial response was that I was going to need to gather some compelling research. But once I started exploring it, I realized that there's really no need. The evidence is overwhelming. There is no refuting the fact that cell phones and social media are harmful to our youth. When I mentioned to my own teenagers, I have 17-year-old twin boys that would be giving this talk, one of them immediately jumped into, "Hey, Mom, there's this graph that shows way back."
Dr. Yukika,
Yeah.
we first of all, we appreciate your recognizing our time limits, but if you don't mind slowing it down a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
No,
Sorry about that. Thank
No.
you.
Yeah.
All right. So when I mentioned to my teenagers I'd be talking, they brought up to me the graph. I think it's actually the graph that is behind you that shows when iPhones came out, there was a huge spike in cell phone use. There was a huge downfall in person-to-person interaction and a huge spike in depression. And my son said this to me immediately because he wanted to make sure that I knew that the problems with depression came long before the pandemic, that it really started with the introduction of cell phones. So I was really taken aback that my kids were so savvy about that. So I want to start off by talking about social engagement. School functions to teach more than academics. School is the main opportunity for children to learn social skills. The skills that we learn in kindergarten are obvious, but it's really important that children continue to learn and gain skills through all of high school. Since we live in Vermont, I feel like I need to comment on homeschoolers. Even in the homeschooling community, you will find that so many homeschool groups exist. And they exist because parents who want to homeschool recognize their children need socialization. Can you imagine one of these groups where all the children get together and take out their iPhones and don't interact with each other? Clearly, that's absurd. So why we're allowing that to happen in our public schools is really a mystery to me, and it's something that we need to change. Children who have social anxiety, neurodiversity, and special needs are our children at the greatest risk of having poor outcomes. In my own practice here, I constantly have parents telling me that they are desperate for their children to have opportunities to develop socially, but they're not able to because everybody has their face in a phone. Kids without cell phones may feel isolated when that is the main facilitator of communication at school. Of course, a parent can choose not to allow their child to have a cell phone, but it's not an adequate solution because there's nobody left for them to interact with because everybody else has their phones out. And in our current climate, being the only child in school without a cell phone would exacerbate the students' feelings of being different and not fitting in. Then there are the children with lower socioeconomic status. I meant to point out that my medical practice is about 65% Medicaid. So I have a lot of patients who are in this lower socioeconomic status. These are the children who have limited social engagement opportunities outside of school. When they're home, they have lots of time for screens, but they're less likely to have parents with the time, energy, or knowledge to supervise their screen use. The more time on a screen, the greater the risks of depression and suicide, not to mention the missed opportunity to develop other skills. My own 8-year-old is particularly poor at entertaining himself when he doesn't have a screen and he has downtime. So despite my own knowledge and my own effort, I am fighting this battle at home. Creativity takes practice. There's no opportunity for nurturing a child's creativity when they have a screen to provide constant entertainment. School avoidance is another thing that I battle in my practice. School avoidance is a specific anxiety disorder. And I remember the first teen patient I cared for who had this. I was newly in practice in Vermont. It was around 2007. At the time, it was very unusual. The next patient I recall with this was in 2013. Now, currently, I have a conservative estimate at least 15 patients with much more severe symptoms than the teen I cared for in 2007. Eating disorders are another specific anxiety disorder, one that's also very hard to treat and often has lifelong implications, even in the best of outcomes. My practice alone has seen a tremendous spike. There's clear evidence that the mental health crisis started long before the pandemic. My impression is that the eating disorder spike is the combination that resulted from social media and the pandemic. In addition to all the mental health problems that are caused by the loss of social engagement, there are many other negative consequences, including life skills, job preparedness, and the ability to function in society overall. As a small business owner, I have witnessed the difficulty my young employees have with performing their job tasks and behaving professionally. They cannot put down their cell phones at work. They do not understand that checking Facebook on the work computer or shopping at Amazon is inappropriate when they're at work and have other tasks on hand. They did not learn in high school to put their devices down and participate in high school. They're at work, they're again not participating. they didn't develop that skill. New high school graduates are having delusional thoughts that the skills they're learning online will translate into real life employable skills. It's understandable for kids to grow up thinking that they're going to be a rock and roll star or a football great, but by high school graduation, we expect them to have more realistic expectations. However, the virtual world has sold such a delusional bill of goods that more and more teens are believing they are using their time wisely. I have a 20-year-old who plans to race car. He plans to be a race car teacher. He can drive race car. He can teach race car driving because he bought a fancy steering wheel accessory for his video game console. He's an otherwise normally functioning adult. But kids think that what they're learning, what they're doing online has real life transitional skills, when in reality, it doesn't. So one of the things that we worry about is, of course, this term of digital literacy. So I really want to make sure that we're clear on what this bill is proposing. This bill is not proposing that we remove tech from schools. High schoolers can still use computers in class when appropriate. What this bill hopes to accomplish is to remove the distractions and the dangers of cell phones during the school day. The goal is to create a safe environment on all school grounds by eliminating algorithm-driven social media platforms. One concern I hear with the proposal that if we remove cell phones from schools, that teens will not be prepared for life after school. But that's really, there's no need for such a concern. For starters, removing cell phones from school campuses is not removing them from teens. They will have plenty of non-school hours to use their devices. Personally, I strongly prefer that my 17-year-olds have their cell phones on them when they travel and when they ski, so if there's an emergency, they can reach me. Of course, I recommend no more than 2 hours of screen time per day for my teens and everybody else. Furthermore, devices are incredibly intuitive. 3-year-olds can operate iPad. There's really not much need for practice. One of my own kids experienced this. He spent 3 weeks at Georgetown 2 summers ago. He had no cell phone device, and it was such a hassle because he needed his cell phone to get into buildings. He needed his cell phone for the school plan, and the people who organized this never expected a teenager would show up without a cell phone. So it was quite a hurdle. The following summer, he spent 2 weeks on UVM's campus, and I wasn't going through that again. So I made sure he had a cell phone before he arrived. He was not very cell phone savvy upon arrival, but he put out his phone. He asked the TA to teach him how to load the apps. They taught him the apps. It actually showed that he had some bonding because he needed the help to figure out how to use his phone, and he was up and running within days. So I'm not one bit worried about our lack of phone savviness.
So Ms. Yukika, Dr. Yukika, I need you to sort of, any other high points that you want to touch on? Because we do have other weaknesses, that's all.
Yes, there are a few. One really important one is the myth of safety. People are constantly saying that there are true concerns of safety, and it's one of the reasons they don't want to take cell phones away, but it's such a misconception. We know that cell phones and social media, that youth carries numerous risks. This includes, but is not limited to, depression, isolation, anxiety, development of eating disorders, suicidality, increased risk of bullying, online predators, sexual misconduct, especially in the form of nude photos and distribution of child pornography, plus oral and neurocognitive risks that include worsened ADHD symptomatology, worsened reading comprehension, worsened academic performance, even the sexual dysfunction that my young adult male patients are experiencing because of their overconsumption of porn. I see every one of those things that I listed all the time, and it was not a problem going back to the start of my practice. It is all very closely linked to cell phone and social media use. And then there's the perceived concerns of safety, which is a really important point to make. Parents want the ability to reach their child in a case of an emergency while the child is at school. And I understand that, but let's be real. The emergency that they're worried about is school shootings. Having the ability to communicate to one's parents that you're alive is great, but does not actually increase your safety. It's faster reassurance, but there's no change in the outcome. But the use of a device can give away a child's hiding place, and therefore a child having a device on them during an actual school shooting causes the risk of an actual negative outcome. I certainly welcome gun reform. That's the problem there. but not access to cell phones. And when we're talking about safety, it's really telling to realize that those who work in the tech industry, who design social media platforms and the algorithms, are the #1 parents who are not allowing their own children to have cell phones and use social media. I want to talk really quickly to the points that were raised in Vermont Digger that Dr. Levine mentioned. There was the question that the most marginalized youth, those who experience social isolation or at much higher rates than average, can find hope and community online. That idea definitely has some truth to it. I've known patients who learned about the trans community and made friends, even friends who developed true in-person relationships with. But that doesn't happen during the school day. That happens outside the school day. So the potential benefit to the connection in those marginalized communities is irrelevant to the idea of banning cell phones at school. He also added that he would like to see a focus on health education that could give youth the skills to navigate the complexities of the digital world, and that state officials could develop sample policies related to using phones in social media and learning environments. I feel it's really important that we respond to that. I appreciate the work Dr. Levine does. I found his leadership through the pandemic really valuable, but I need to note he's an internist. He's not a pediatrician. He's not working day to day with the kids who we are seeing who are suffering. It's not reasonable to expect that a focus on health education is enough to educate our youth and to help them to navigate the complexities of the digital world. No elementary or high school curriculum can be developed that can successfully combat dark design. A great deal of science has gone into creating the addictive nature of social media. Thinking that some school-based education is enough to battle that is like expecting a water bottle to put out a forest fire. It would be laughable if it was not so disturbing as it is, because it's our youth who we are sacrificing. I was speaking with teens this weekend. One teen said, I know dumb kids who know why smartphones are bad for them, and I know smart kids who know why cell phones are bad for them, but they both use it anyway. And the teenager standing next to him said, yes, that is how addiction works. You know it is bad for you, but you can't walk away from it.
Dr. Yukiko, we have a question, and then I think we only have 15 more minutes for 4 more witnesses. So one question, Senator Kulik.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yukika, for your passionate testimony today on cell phones. I wanted to ask you something because the testimony we're getting today is painting a very bleak and dire picture. Why are you not in favor, or maybe you are, of just an outright ban under the age of 18 for kids to have cell phones? I mean, when I do the math, kids have fewer than 180 days of school a year. They're in school for 6, maybe 7 hours a day. That leaves, 17 to 18 hours a day when they're not in school, over 185 days a year when they're not in school. Why are you not elevating this to another level of urgency?
So I would certainly consider that. I think that the biggest problem, so I think my #1 goal would be to improve the culture and the society that we live in. Cell phones are not going to disappear. I wouldn't mind if they did. But if we can at least make it so it's not okay to use your cell phones in school, people would then, that culture will carry over. They will then know when they get to college and they're sitting in a class with a professor, they can't whip out their phone and be doing other things. So I'm looking for the lowest fruit we can grab to change the culture. And I wouldn't be opposed to banning it outright. I guess I feel like it's less realistic. And there is the one piece of, in the state of Vermont, you can drive at age 16, and having children have access to a cell phone while they're driving, obviously not while they're driving, but if they were to break down or pull over, or when they're at the gas station, they can't figure out how to get the gas gauge to work, a cell phone might have a place there. It's really the social media and the interruption of the cell phone during school that I'm most concerned with.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yukika. Mr. Holloman, I guess the way to approach this, since we only have less than 15 minutes, is there new information that we haven't heard from our witnesses that you would like to share? And then we can open it, we can ask you a couple of questions. But I think, as Senator Gulick said, the picture has definitely been painted. So is there anything in particular that you would like to share?
I'm gonna concur with pretty much everything I've heard. In trying to remember everything that I've written into my statement, nothing stands out. Let me read one paragraph that may address.
Please, absolutely.
Something. So I read yesterday where Jay Nichols, the executive director of the Principals Association, is quoted as saying that the association is, quote, on the front line of the negative impacts of digital addiction to social media, but then goes on to say, quote, end quote, after social media, goes on to say, quote, providing mental health resources that students need when they need them is probably, I'll pause there, probably a better approach to addressing mental health needs in students than banning cell phones and social media from schools from our perspective. I write, with all due respect to Mr. Nichols, his logic does not compute. To be, as he says, on the front line is to come from a place of proactiveness. Frontline efforts aim to address problems before they explode. And granted, this problem exploded long ago, and now we're trying to triage it the best we can. And this bill attempts to do that. Frontline to address problems before they explode, and only the most intense triage work salvages what is left to salvage. Mr. Nichols claimed that providing mental health resources that students need when they need them is probably a better approach, better than eliminating phone accessibility during the school day to addressing mental health needs in students is reactive. Essentially, Mr. Nichols admits to the negative impact of digital addiction to social media, but argues it's preferable to wait until kids get unhealthy and then treat the symptoms with mental health counselors, which, by the way, are not nearly enough in our schools, given the number of mental health issues. So I ask you, how does that Band-Aid approach make any sense when what is at stake is the mental and physical well-being of the next generation of young adults? Why? Because a ban, I think, as Mr. Nichols puts it, is an uncomfortable word, replete with potential controversy. But again, I ask, is avoiding controversy temporarily displeased parents and students who no longer have access to the rabbit hole of social media and messaging services during the day more desirable to that of protecting the health of our next generation or generations of American adults? I think probably we all know the answer to that. I've been teaching for almost 25 years, and I think I wrote that it was probably 10, 12 years ago that I began to see the decline, particularly in students' ability to attend to what we were trying to accomplish in the classroom. I would say over the last 5 years, this is anecdotal, through just my own personal observation, that has hastened and it's gotten more complicated. Our school has finally adopted a no cell phone in the classroom policy, and it does help. It does actually help. I last year on my own decided to do that because I couldn't exist in the classroom any longer, having to constantly intervene when the playing field is not level. I think I'm a pretty animated guy. I still have a passion and a love for what I'm doing. I bring that energy to the classroom, but as I tell the kids, I am no competition. I can't compare to what they have access to in their pocket. And
Mr. Holland, did you receive a lot of opposition when you did that? And was there a lot of opposition at the school level when that was done?
I certainly received opposition from the students. I think the most common grievance was that I didn't trust them. You know, we're 17 years old, we're 18-year-olds. Why can't you trust us? to be able to control ourselves and to make our own decisions. And I told them, because I've witnessed it long enough, that it's not fair to you. I don't trust the power, the omnipotence of what is in your pocket, and the allure of that. Adults, and we all know them, adults can't even, most of the time, control their impulses and their need to check their phones. And young brains especially in a classroom where the content may in the moment be dry and boring, as that's like a curse word, boring. It's too great a convenience to go to whatever is distracting and pleasurable to get that hit of dopamine. I get it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Mr. Holloman? Any questions at this point? Okay, feel free to stay on. Dr. Sofke.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. I guess the first thing is that I'm a minor elected myself, and I understand how very difficult it is to make sense of people when they're appearing through a screen. I'm sort of an expert on screens. But the other thing is that I really do want to answer some questions, especially from any of you who might object to this bill, because the whole point is that I'm not there. The second man who spoke, he was on the table there. I don't know his name. His name was Statehouse, I think. And I got to see you respond to him. You got to ask him questions, laugh about some things. You each got to hear how the other people really made sense of it in real life, micro expressions, little giggles or breaths or pauses. That is part of the nervous system communication channel we need, and all kids need. So if I were in the room and if I could answer questions for a full hour or something, I would probably change all of your minds, because weirdly enough, I am probably the most passionate and informed and extreme person on this subject you're ever likely to hear from. So if you'll indulge me the extremity for my few minutes.
And I do have to tell you, we do have a couple of minutes, so we may.
Yes, I understand. My point is that we are wrestling with the deepest scientific and biological problem humanity's ever faced.
Mm-hmm.
My credentials are a Caltech PhD in theoretical physics and neuroscience, Silicon Valley chief algorithm officer, data scientist, software architect. It's just crazy. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I live and breathe information processing. And from that point of view, any screen is an insult to a child. Any blinky, flashy thing is distracting our eyes from how they move around the world. Just the fact that screens are flashing makes them 4 times worse than paper for learning. That statistic needs to be there somewhere. Factor of 4. Same with writing. Writing by hand is 4 times better than typing. What about the suicide rate? Every extra hour of social media time on any kind of a platform increases suicidality by about 1%. These are such deep public health issues that to talk about content or particular platforms or particular anythings is sort of a distraction. The more artificial the input, the more damaging it is. I was going to talk about how my brother took me to Vermont. I went leaf peeping. You have one of the most spectacular sceneries on the planet, and it's because those bright oranges and reds and yellows pop out against the deep blue sky in a way that no pixel can really do, except they do. The pixels are actually popping even more than autumn leaves. That's why kids like them so much. So these things are intrinsically addictive, and the interruptions and distractions are intrinsically damaging. I wish, as a scientist and a deep-end nerd, I could somehow convey the immediacy importance that children need touch. Eye-to-eye gaze, serve and return interaction in person. Every little sparkly thing which takes their eyes away from their friends, their parents, and their fingertips is damaging their nervous system in a deep and possibly irreparable way. So as people responsible for children and for public sanity, I beg at the very least, find a way to let me answer your questions, even if I don't have time to talk more. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Very quick.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Doctor. Very quick question, and it'll save me a Google search, but could you tell me what a successor protocol to transmit information is? It's a phrase that's under social media, and I have no idea what it is.
Well, I'm sorry, but I spend as little time on social media and the internet as possible. So I can speak what the concept of successor protocol would be for a technologist, but I have no idea what young people who aren't technologists would mean. So can you clarify a bit so I know what you're after?
Sure. I'm really just looking for, trying to figure out what a successor protocol to transmit information is. It's, we have a definition section at the beginning, and so then social media is on page 5, and it lists a whole bunch of, blogs, picture sharing vlogs, music sharing, crowdsourcing. And then
this is language in the law.
Yes. So
I'm sorry. I'm in California right now. I don't actually live in Vermont. And so I didn't understand that was from, of course, see, the concept of a successor protocol is you don't want to define your law in terms that somebody can change some modest aspect of it, like the color of the screen or the name of the company, and suddenly get away with things. It's the same general principle. And software, you never want to write something changeable into the code. You want to set it as something which can go like a tax rate, or an inflation rate would be in a tax system or something. So successor protocol is just a way of making sure that this concept, the intent of the law, continues to apply. No matter how slippery the technology manufacturers are. Having grown up in Menlo Park, Technology Central, the entire business model has learned how to not only addict children to screens, but addict teachers to platforms, addict schools to test results, addict administrators to ways of reaching parents. The business model of making software, which worms its way in and you can't get out of, that's how Silicon Valley makes most of its money. So if you want to stop that, define a law where successor protocol covers the future versions, and not just the version which is running around right now. Does that answer your question, you think?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Clear explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sofke. It was fascinating hearing what you had to say, and I look forward to delving into your bio a little bit more. I often in the legislature, I feel like we're playing whack-a-mole with these big, huge systemic issues, and we're sort of plugging little holes here and there. I wonder if this bill is one of those hole plugging mechanisms, and I want to ask you just honestly, what do we do? You're presenting us with this behemoth of a problem that sounds like existential in nature to like humankind. What do we do?
Well, you start in Vermont. In all the country, I'm living in the worst place. Well, second worst. Silicon Valley over the hill is the worst place. I'm on the coast, so I get to have the ocean and the hills and stuff. Vermont has an appreciation of nature and community and sort of personal respect and autonomy and stuff, unlike any other state I've had the privilege of hanging out in. So if anyone is to, ban billboards or ban cell phones or something like that, it would be you guys. If anybody is to produce Bernie Sanders, it would be you guys, okay? So that's why I have my faith in the community of people who can actually know each other's leaders and drive all the way to Montpelier to actually vote on things in person, okay? All of those traditional hippie values, you might say, are the things I'm talking about. Actual real life, long-term relationships, reciprocity, responsibility, all of these are not merely abstractions. It's just the abstractions are easier to measure. And so one of the seismic tilts, and you say existential, it has an existential aspect. The seismic tilt is that we're always biased toward things we have already been measuring, test scores. But measurements cost money. So that whole system tilts toward whoever's got the money to measure the things to prove the thing. And so it all gets legalistic after a while. The only answer is to figure out how to get the intent of the law that you agree to. We want to save children's nervous systems. We do not want to put informational poisons which distract and tangle their brains and distract them from real life. We don't want that to happen. How can we do it? That, whether you ban screens, whether you ban all screens, whether you ban cell phones, this kind of cell phone, social media, depends on a lot of things. But in average, if you look at the actual biology of what children need and what everyone knows real children need first, make that the primary thing in the intent of the law, save their nervous systems, and then worry about the administrative convenience or the test scores or the particular platform or something. You can work out those details later and they will shift. But if you put the most important idea first, it must be saving children, and it must be biology which is unquestionable, to which I would say, please read the paper my wife and I spent 2 years writing unpaid. It's the longest, most prestigious article ever in the Journal of Neural Computation, which is probably the most prestigious such journal, peer-reviewed everything, 100 references, 60 pages long. It's titled Sensory Metrics of Neuromechanical Trust. It's MIT Press, but you can get it free on Archive, the physicist website. That explains everything. And I'd like to close this comment with the 2 lines from the end of that paper, which is peer-reviewed and authoritative science. Human nervous systems, like all nervous systems, evolved to forage, not produce. Humankind uniquely produces things which captivate our senses. And now they do.
Thank you, Dr. Southgate. Very much appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
And if we do have additional questions, we know we can have you back. Jason, you have the final word, and it's going to have to, I'm afraid, be brief. You asked to join us. So what would you like to tell us about this bill?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Jason Van Drysch. I'm the Chief of Staff at Front Porch Forum here in Vermont. I submitted written testimony, and I won't read the whole thing. I'll just call out a couple of highlights. First, just a few words about Front Porch Forum. As many of you, I'm sure, know, we're a mission-driven Vermont public benefit corporation with a mission to help neighbors connect and build community. We have over 230,000 active members across Vermont, including 13,000 Vermont businesses and nonprofits, and nearly 3,000 public officials, among them 20 of the 30 state senators and 104 state representatives. So we really are Vermont's local community communication network. I contacted Senator Gulick and asked to testify because we have a specific concern regarding the definition of social media in this bill. We're strongly supportive of the bill and its intent, but we feel that the definition of social media in the current draft is overbroad and might have the unintended effect of banning schools from using Front Porch Forum to communicate with parents and with their communities. I spoke with Laura Derendinger, who I understand is one of the key advocates for this bill. She said it was very much not her intent that Front Porch Forum be kind of scooped up by this, and she did not see it as social media in the sense of what this bill is trying to rein in and limit impacts on kids. I did a little research, talked with a colleague, Ethan Zuckerman, who's the director of the Initiative on Digital Public Infrastructure at UMass Amherst, and he directed me to a paper that I quoted in my testimony that offers what he described to me as the core seminal definition of social media. It's in a paper called Social Network Sites, Definition, History, and Scholarship by Boyd and Ellison, which has been cited 20,000 plus times. And he described it to me as the central paper in academic scholarship about social networks. So that's what he gave me when I asked him, what's a authoritative definition of social media that is specific, to the point, gets to the heart of what we're actually trying to talk about here, what the problems are, but isn't overbroad. And the definition he gave is this one here, which is that social network sites are web-based services that allow individuals to, 1, construct a public or semi-public profile within a bounded system being something like Facebook or Twitter or what have you. 2, articulate a list of other users with whom they share a connection, friending, etc. And then 3, view and traverse their list of connections and those made by others within the system. So it's a network. It's a way of connecting across a web of connections with a wide range of people. Front Porch Forum really is not social media in that sense. We're more like a listserv, something that people can subscribe to around shared interests, as opposed to a network that might end up connecting you with who knows what from who knows where. So my request to you is that you consider an update to the definition of social media so as to avoid unintended consequences and negative impacts on Front Porch Forum, which clearly is not what you are trying to rein in with this legislation, but which might be an unintended consequence absent some sort of revision. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
And our committee assistant has received the testimony. He is printing it out and he will share it with all of us. And as we continue the conversation, we will certainly take that into consideration. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're going to leave it there. And committee, we're going to shift gears. So let's take a 5-minute break and we have Ms. St. James. We'll move on to S167.